On this episode of Media Credentials, my guest is Ty Eastham, the Vice President of Broadcasting for the Orlando Magic. We cover his path from Indiana University to the NBA, his longevity with the franchise, and the process of producing live basketball. We also discuss how remote production has changed the industry and what may come next. Plus, why the Magic are worth the price of NBA League Pass, and the story of how Ty and I got an exclusive interview with Hall of Fame coach Bob Knight. No, really, that actually happened. My name is Whit Watson, and this is Media Credentials. I'm a sports announcer who's worked a lot of places. This podcast will peel back the layers of sports media and show you how the sausage gets made. Through interviews with industry pros and my own experience, you'll understand why you're seeing what you're seeing and who's responsible for it. Your media credentials have been approved. Welcome into Media Credentials. I've spent the last 13 plus years working in golf, but at heart, I'm a basketball junkie. I got attached to the game when Orlando received an NBA expansion franchise in 1987 to begin play in 1989, which was the year I graduated from high school. My dad was actually an original Magic season ticket holder, and we'd go to games together when I came back on school breaks. My first job out of college was an internship with the Magic during the 93-94 season. Shaquille O'Neal was in his second year in the league, and Penny Hardaway was a rookie. So yeah, I go way back. It was during that first internship season that I met my podcast guest, Ty Eastham. As you're about to hear, Ty got his start with the Magic while he was an intern at Sunshine Network, what is now called Bally Sports. And as we were the same age and the same stage in our careers just starting out, we became friends pretty quickly. There are very few people in the industry that I have known longer than I've known Ty. Today, he's the Vice President of Broadcasting for the Magic, and he's the producer in the truck for every Magic telecast. In this episode, he'll talk about how he was drawn to television production in the first place. He discusses the chemistry between himself and the team's announcers, and also offers his thoughts on where this young team is going. I have a long history with this franchise and luckily still have a lot of friends there. And I'm grateful that I was able to get my friend Ty to come talk about his place in sports media for this episode of Media Credentials. Nobody was happier than this man when the Orlando Magic drafted Victor Oladipo and Brian Evans before him, proud Indiana University Hoosier Ty Eastham. Tell me how it got started. How did you develop an interest in sports broadcasting?
You know, I probably didn't even know it, but I was from an early age. There were two things that were important in my life, and that was sports and that was television.
Yeah.
And I love to watch TV, you know, anything, comedies, dramas, This Week in Baseball, Indiana basketball games. And I love TV and probably watched, they would say watch too much TV, but, look where I am. So it worked out. But, and then the other thing was just playing sports. And I love to play every sport, basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer, growing up in Indiana. And when I went to Indiana from Florida, moved to Florida before high school. When I went to Indiana, I went there originally to go into business. I thought I wanted to go into advertising because I obviously saw a lot of advertisements in watching television, and I kind of thought that would be a cool way to be creative and get in the business. And while I was at Indiana, looking through the guide for the class guide, I noticed this telecommunications classes where you learned about TV and production and all that. And I was like, this is really a thing. I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I took, intro to telecommunications and learned about, cable television, the history of TV, blah, 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 and saw that there were production classes. And immediately I was hooked. I was like, I think this is my major. And then, they didn't have a lot of sports television classes. It was just more about TV. And it was probably my junior year. they actually started a class. It was the first time they had the class. It was called sports television. And so I started, I took that class, and, actually one of the assignments was you had to do some type of a sports television paper on something, anything related. It was a very fly by seat of your pants. The instructor was very good, but was like, hey, I'm learning this class as we go too. So I reached out to Sunshine Network in Orlando back home and asked for all their information about them. And they sent me a pamphlet of stuff about their, cable television network. And I wrote a paper on it. And that was kind of my introduction to, like, oh, these people like produce all these sports programming. And it was amazing. It kind of opened my eyes. I was like, well, maybe that's what I want to do. So it was a lot of things came to pass for me to get interested in it. But I feel like I was destined for it.
And for those who don't know, Sunshine Network begat Sun Sports, which became Fox Sports Sun, which is now Bally Sports Sun,
Right.
which is the network that carries Orlando Magic games. But your situation is a little bit different because you're a team employee, right?
Correct.
So how does that work?
So basically, as far as the NBA goes, there are a few other people that the producers are team employees, but a lot of places the producers are either network employees with the Bally Sports, or they're freelancers that are contracted through Bally Sports. It's just one of the things all along with the Magic and Bally, it's just been kind of written into the contract that the Magic hire the producer, and so Bally, has agreed to it. I've had conversations with people at Bally, and some of them are like, well, we kind of like having the producer under our wing, but then I also see the other side of it. Is I'm like, well, I have a lot of access and information, and I'm very close. Obviously I've been there, over 25 years. I've got a lot of relationships at the Magic that I think benefit our broadcast, because I have a lot of information that I can use.
You mentioned 25 years in the same place. How did you get started? You reached out to Sunshine Network, but with the Magic specifically, how did you get in?
Yeah, well, I'll back up a little bit. So that Sunshine Network, the information I got, that was my junior year. And then so the summer after my junior year, I was coming home, and I wanted to do an internship. Actually, was taking an internship class, I believe. And so I reached back out to Sunshine Network and said, hey, do you guys have any internships? And they were like, well, we actually don't, but we've been talking about starting an internship program. And so myself and another guy who was a marketing intern, we were the very first interns at Sunshine Network. And so I kind of got to see behind the scenes a little bit. It was a summer, so there weren't Magic games going on. There was, arena football and some Florida Georgia high school football game that they produced. But there was that was the year they drafted Shaq. Mm-hmm. And there was a Shaq press conference at the arena for his signing, and I was there. And in the old video, you can see the back of my head. I won't tell you what my mullet looked like, but I was there. So that was kind of my first introduction to the Magic. And then when I graduated from college the next year, I came back to Orlando, and I did have some conversations with people at local stations, and I kind of determined that I did not want to work at a local station doing news. And I reached out to the Magic broadcasting department, John Cook, who you know, and asked for an internship. Didn't get any response, kept calling, and eventually, Kevin Cosgrove called me up and said, we don't have any interns anymore. Apparently Whit Watson was already an intern.
Sorry.
And he said, would you like to come work in the Jumbotron room for every home game, doing instant replay? I said, sure, I would love to. But he says, come on in and let's talk about it. So basically my interview was a old Beta machine with a tape in it, and he tested me whether I could basically press rewind and fast forward and roll it at 50%.
Right.
And I got the job. So that was my introduction to the Magic. I started working on game nights and eventually convinced them to hire me as a freelancer to come in and edit, money reels and, little features and things.
And people were dating ourselves by using words like jumbotron and beta. For those who don't know, this was
Mm-hmm.
a very analog era, and when
Right.
you wanted to replay something on the big screen in the arena, somebody had to physically rewind the tape, like Ty just said, and advance it by 50%. And that's something else that I think people really don't understand is that when they go to an NBA game or NFL or any major professional sport where they have the big giant screens, there are two shows going on. There's the television show and there's the in arena show.
Right.
How much of what you learned in the jumbotron room were you able to translate once you started working on the television side of it?
Quite a bit because that was it was a smaller operation compared to what they're doing in the TV, in the TV trucks. But it had everything. It had a director, a TD, graphics operator, a replay operator. And while it was small, and there was one of each of us basically, but I learned the inner workings of basically a live production. And eventually, I moved over to graphics, and then eventually I moved up to directing the in arena feed, and I could even TD a little bit. I learned the switcher just a little bit. I can't TD, but so that was valuable to my success is just learning all that and each individual area. It was great.
So walk us through a typical home game day. What is the schedule? You as the producer of Magic Broadcast on Bally Sports Sun, what's the procedure on a game day when you're at home?
Well, I'll back up to the day before the game. Like today, we have a game tomorrow, and just before we got on this podcast, I'm getting ready for tomorrow's game as the producer. I'm looking up stats, looking up storylines, and getting all my elements together onto my rundown for tomorrow, and coming up with ideas for our opens and for our sponsored elements. And then tomorrow morning at the team's on the road, but probably around 11 a.m., we'll have a Zoom call with David and Jeff, and Dante, and our director, Greg. And we'll have a Zoom call and we'll go over all of our elements and open ideas and any other ideas anybody has, things that we should cover. So we'll have about a half hour, 45-minute meeting in the morning at 11. The game's at 8 o'clock Eastern, so it'll probably be a 12 o'clock call. Then the crew call is at 12:30 for me at Amway Center. We're actually doing it remotely, which we can get into that a little bit later. But so I'll show up with the crew basically at 12:30, and from 12:30 to 4:30, we'll prepare all the elements, edit all the video, get the graphics all together, take a break, come back, pre-produce elements with graphics, combine things, and then the announcers will get there. We'll show them all the elements, and then interview the coach, and then the game starts at 8 o'clock, and we're ready to go with all of our stuff.
And that's something, since you brought it up, I was definitely going to get into, and people may not know that this year you are doing road games remotely. You and
Right.
most of the crew are staying in Orlando. Tell us why that's happening, and how do you feel about not being able to travel and being in the arena?
At first it was something I was not looking forward to, obviously, because I do feel that being on the road, our announcers still travel, but being on the road and being with announcers, having dinners, conversations on the plane, things like that add to the broadcast.
I agree. Yep.
We're always talking about the team. We're always talking about the broadcast, and you never know where some kind of crazy idea will come up on the plane or at a dinner or something, and you're like, oh yeah, let's do that tomorrow, and so that's lost. But obviously, during the pandemic, we learned that Zoom is a valuable resource, so we're still able to meet every morning and have our normal production meeting. I still don't think it's the same as being in the same room, but those are the things you lose. But then after doing it, as far as the actual production. I do think you miss something. I can tell, but I think the people at home can't tell. I've been told that they don't realize that we're doing it remotely like that. So in that sense, it's been okay from a production standpoint. From a lifestyle standpoint, it's been life changing. So I've been home. Instead of being having a day off in Denver before the next game, I'm actually home with my wife and my kids, and we're able to do things. And I'm just like, hey, if I was, normally I would be in Denver, just sit in my hotel room or going out to dinner, but I'm here with you guys, able to do a lot of stuff. So it's been great from a life standpoint.
You talked about the amount of time you've been with the organization, and you mentioned David Steele, and Jeff Turner are the on-air announced team. Dante Marcatelli, who does sidelines, post-game, pre-game, he's been there for 20 years. David is an original employee. Jeff Turner played for the expansion teams. On the media relations side, George Galanti, Joel Glass, Trish Wingerson, they've all been there 20 years or longer. Is that common? Do you find that a lot among other NBA teams, or is that unique to the Magic?
I think it's somewhat unique to the Magic. I think it's a testament to our organization, our ownership, our leadership. They take care of their employees, and we all want to stay there, and we all enjoy working there, and it's a family, type atmosphere. But I mean, I do see a lot of other people around the league that have been there a long time. So I think, one of the things is when you get one of these jobs with a professional sports team, they're rare. They're rare jobs. And so there's only 30 NBA teams. So there's not that many jobs to go around. So if this is the industry you want to work in and you land one of these jobs, you tend to stick with it because you enjoy it and love it. I mean, I think that's the bottom line is we all enjoy our jobs so much that, we're not going to work for someone else.
Explain the origin of "Is This Anything" on the Magic broadcast. It's one of my favorite parts of the broadcast every
Yeah.
night.
Yeah. It's, and I hope I don't, I hope I do it justice or do it right. But from my recollection, and David has talked about it as well, several years ago, I can't remember, I think we've been doing it 7, 8 years, but the Magic were in, kind of the doldrums. We knew we were going to lose. Basically we were looking for a top draft pick the next year. We knew we were going to lose a lot of games that year. And, at one of our it might have been a preseason production meeting, Dave was talking about, we got to have things that are going to, have some fun and do some things every night. And David always came to the meetings with some kind of crazy stat or something like that. And then we would use it, on a sponsored thing, the Toyota Trend or something like that. But if I remember correctly, we were talking about it and we're like, hey, why don't we every night do, David's basically stat of the night, and some crazy stat or whatever it is. And it was David's idea to do that. And, I said, yeah, let's do that. And then it was like, okay, what are we going to call it? We always talked about, David always had little nuggets and things like that to pop into the broadcast and stuff. So I was like, well, David's Nuggets isn't going to work. We can't do that. So David, I guess in his family, they always would say, I don't know if this is anything, but blah, blah, blah. They use the phrase, is this anything? Or, and so he said, what about that? And I was like, yeah. And then you can ask if it's anything and, we'll decide, And then from there, it kind of grew once we said we're asking a question and everything like that. So I just said, well, let's get a bell and a buzzer together and we can decide, decide. And then it was like, well, who's going to decide? And it has just evolved. And okay, let's go to the truck. Or in the early years, we actually brought in guests into the truck, and we would get a shot of them, hitting the, so-called buzzer or bell for the guy. I remember one time we had Tommy Heinsohn in Boston. We got a camera shot of him, and we pre-taped it and said, "Give us a thumbs up, Tommy." And he just looked at the camera, gave us a thumbs up, and we hit the bell at the same time. So it was Tommy Heinsohn giving him the bell. So that's kind of where it all started, and it's just evolved into a great feature for us every night.
Well, David always has the nuggets, right? I mean, and
Yeah,
talk about having an announced team that knows each other as well as David and Jeff do. Dante also has been there a very long time. He was an intern. We were all interns at one time or another.
right.
How much easier does it make your job to have them out there?
Oh, I mean, it's it's unbelievably important. I would, you look around the league. I'm sure there are some, but it'd be hard to find a closer knit group than those three or us four that have been here for so long and doing this. To the point where when we come to those production meetings, we know exactly what everybody wants to talk about. We know each other so well. Like I can put together a show and they're like, okay, yeah, let's go with that. There's not a lot of back and forth because we're all on the same page, and we truly, and that's part of what I miss with traveling is that we truly enjoy each other's company. We enjoy hanging out. We enjoy, talking about the Magic and talking about things, and so I think it comes across on the air. I've had people, I've heard people say that, it comes across on there. You can really tell that these guys all like each other, and it makes for a fun broadcast. I hopefully fans enjoy watching it and can pick up on that.
What are your memories of the NBA season played in the bubble here in Orlando?
Yeah, that was a unique time. We were actually we did the shows out of the control room at Amway Center. We didn't even bring in a truck. We just used the in arena control room. We set up our announcers on the practice court. Actually, that's where we had our pregame set, was on the practice court. David and Jeff were in the media room calling the game off of monitors, and it was a very cumbersome and not good situation. I mean, there were people in the bubble that were basically producing the games, putting the games together, and then we were back taking the feeds, and there was a world feed coming from Disney, and we would basically take that feed and try to manipulate it to do what we needed to do on our end as far as sponsors and replays and things like that. So it was a challenging time. I mean, I think it was just good that we got the games on the air and we were able to play the games. So in that sense, it was great, but definitely taught us a lot of things, how we didn't want to do that anymore, and we valued what we were doing on a regular basis normally.
But you brought up a good point too, that the move towards doing more and more production remotely has really changed the whole landscape of the business. And what do you think is coming next? Are we going to see more of that? Do you see more of a return to more people in person? Like what do you think the shift is going to be?
I really don't know. I mean, I'm hoping there's not more of a shift to remote. I mean, I think we've established that it's important for the announcers to be at the venue with the team, embedded with the team, and knowing what's going on. I feel like we've taken as far a step back from that with the production crew as we can. So as we move forward, they're always going to be looking to how can we cut costs? How can we use technology to do things that would eliminate certain costs to us, whether it's traveling or a crew member on site or that kind of thing. So I don't know what the next thing is, but I do know that we've hopefully are going to maintain some type of normalcy with this for a while and until we master it. And I definitely don't want to take anything more away from our away broadcasts.
Is there anything in the business that you've always wanted to do? Do you have a bucket list of an event you'd like to work or some just something you've always wanted to do?
When I first started, I thought, my goal was to be, work on the national level and do at the time, an NBC game or, a TNT game or something like that. I quickly realized that, we're basically doing that. We're doing that high level production every night. But as far as events, I mean, and me, I would love to produce an Indiana basketball game,
Mm-hmm.
Indiana Hoosier basketball game at Assembly Hall. So that would be kind of my bucket list. And, the funny thing is I know the people at Big Ten Network. I know some of the people that produce and direct those shows. I really probably on my end should do a little more to say, hey, can I just come do one game kind of
Right.
thing? So, but I just haven't done that. But that's probably where I would want to go is do one of those games.
Well, you've had the opportunity to sit down for an interview with Bob Knight,
That's true.
as I recall. That
Yeah.
was I've dined out on that one for many, many years now. What's your recollection about that? So the background was the Orlando Magic had just drafted Brian Evans out of Indiana,
Mhm.
and you were operating the camera and producing an interview that we had scheduled with Bob Knight. And we were in Bloomington, Indiana, because the Magic were playing, I guess, a preseason game, right? In the
Yeah.
Indianapolis.
Yeah, we were playing the Pacers for a preseason game. Yeah.
Right. And what do you remember about that? I've never been more intimidated for an interview in my entire life.
Oh, I know.
What was
I
your memory of it?
I remember flying on the plane up with you, and you just asked me so many questions about, oh, is this question okay? What do you think about this?
Right.
How is he going to react to this? And I'm
Is he
like,
going to yell at me? Right.
yeah, exactly. And then I remember we got to the assembly hall. They set us up in a room, and that room was actually I took a class, an
That's
8-week
right.
course that was taught by Bob Knight. It was called Coaching Basketball, and you would go into this room, and he would walk up and down the aisles between the students and basically lecture us. And it was a lot about teaching. He was big into teaching. He was big into he said this should be an education class. You should be an education major to be in this class. He goes, so his whole thing was kind of teaching and coaching like a high school team. That was kind of the basis of everything of where he spoke. And then you would take this class, and then you would go out to the court, and they would run you through drills. They would show you different drills that they use. So it was coaching basketball. It was teaching you to be a high school or middle school teacher and coach. And it was great. And so the room that he lectured in was the room they put us in to do this interview. So it was kind of like nostalgic, and it was kind of surreal. And he came in, and from what I can remember, he couldn't have been nicer.
He was
And
good.
He answered every question. I tried to talk to him a little bit because going back, I grew up in Bloomington until I was 13 years old, and I played basketball and baseball with his son. Bob Knight used to come to my baseball games and well, games I was playing in, and because I was on his son's team, and watch us play. So I was familiar with him. I was familiar with his family, and I took that class, and I do remember kind of mentioning all that to him, and he was just kind of like, yeah, okay. He didn't really respond too much. Because I was trying to break the ice a little bit for us before you
Right.
started in, like to give us a little. I think we even talked about that. Like you talked to him about that, and then that'll kind of break the ice. And so we did that, and then he answered every question. He was great, and as much as he's it's been written that he can't stand the NBA. He spoke very highly of Brian Evans and all that, and it was a great interview. Really
I remember the way that I finally got him loosened up was by telling him how smart he was, that Evans was not very highly recruited out of high school. And I think the question I asked him was, what did you see that nobody else in the Big Ten saw? In other words, you discovered something that nobody else figured out, and that got him loose.
Right.
Talking about what a great job he did recruiting Brian Evans.
Sure, yeah.
That's the secret. Last couple of thoughts before I let you go.
Mm-hmm.
This team is a lot of fun to watch. It's absolutely a league pass worthy franchise right now. Very young as we speak, still on the cusp of the play-in, and depending on when you listen to this, that might not be a thing. But what do you think the future holds for the Magic? Because right now, it seems like there are so many alpha players on this roster that are all so young but able to work together. What do you see as the future for this team?
Well, I mean, I think this summer will be interesting. We're going to have, if we don't make the play-in, we're going to have probably a top 5 pick. We also get Chicago's pick, which could be a lottery or close to it pick. So potentially we could have 2 more first-round picks. We'll see how that plays out because we're already so young. You never know what free agents or disgruntled stars might be, around the league that you can go after and that kind of thing. So who knows what this team's going to look like, but it's so promising. I mean, Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner have just like amazed us what they can do at such a young age. And remember, Paolo's just a rookie, Franz is a second year, and then they're pretty much the leaders of this team, and they're gonna get even better next year. If Fultz is healthy for the entire year, we're 27-23 in our last 50 games, so that's like 10th best in the league. And so if we had a healthy Fultz for the whole season, who knows? I would argue that maybe we're not in a play-in situation. We're actually in the playoffs if we had him all year. So the future is so bright with this young team and the potential of draft picks, and who else knows what could come on the horizon that you could pair with these guys. It's fun. This is the funnest season we've had in a long time, just because not only are we winning games, but we're playing some exciting basketball. We haven't had a lot of blowouts. I mean, even if we lose, it's a close game, and we feel like we had a chance to win. So those are fun to cover and watch. So the future is really bright. We hear it from everybody that I really like your team. You guys are on the way up. So and we've been doing this for several years, thinking we're about to take the next step. But I really feel like we're about to.
In podcasting, this is called a call to action. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please consider subscribing to the podcast, sharing it, or leaving a review. Let me know what you'd like to hear next time on Media Credentials. A final thought on the topic of longevity. The Magic are now wrapping up their 34th season in the NBA as I record this. In that span, there have been 14 different head coaches. The team's first head coach, Matt Guokas, was reassigned within the organization in June of 1993, which was maybe a couple of months before Ty and I both arrived at the old Orlando Arena. However, Ty would go on to work with Matt on the broadcast side when Guokas was paired up with David Steele. The point is, Ty has had touch points with every head coach in Orlando Magic history. And he's not the only person in that front office who can make that claim. In fact, far from it. The roster of Magic employees who have been there 20, 25 plus years is extensive. I agree with Ty when he says it's a testament to the organization that he and so many others in the front office have chosen to stay there as long as they have. As he put it, these jobs are rare. And I think as we bring more guests onto the podcast, you'll find that to be a common theme among people in the sports media industry. We stick with it because, honestly, we can't imagine doing anything else. Thanks again for listening to Media Credentials. For examples of my work, including video and audio clips, a blog, and my contact page, check out whitwatson.com.